Hey there, everyone. I'm Bante Rakkhita Samanera. Pleased to meet you. And this is today's talk where I'm going to be focusing on thriving amidst life's chaos with the chill factor, thriving in the middle of mayhem. Now, this is more than survival. It's about finding ways to embrace the mayhem and emerge stronger. So we'll be exploring both the lessons and some reflective prompts that help guide us through this, a bit like stepping into a personal growth workshop. So let's dive into the first theme, and it's integrating new beginnings. You know, when they have a house and the decorators go in, and they call this fresh starts and do-overs. So this centers on the idea that new beginnings hold hidden opportunities. But here's the key. Our mindset determines how we perceive these moments. There's the trick. Imagine standing before a blank canvas or a blank wall. Do you feel excitement at the possibilities? Or does it seem daunting and scary to you? And this is the difference between viewing a new start as an opportunity or a threat. Our brains often alert us to potential danger in the unknown, thanks to the amygdala, the part of the brain that triggers the fight or flight response. The chill factor approach encourages us to recognize these fears, but not let them paralyze us. When we see that blank canvas, rather than bracing for danger, we can frame it as an invitation to experiment, to grow. So here's a practical prompt for you. Consider the new beginnings in your life. Ones you have right now. It could be a new job. It could be a recent move. It could be even a shift in your personal habits. Identify any fears that are holding you back. Are they fears of failure, of the unknown, fears of rejection, of what others might think? Remember, these fears are natural, but they don't need to control you. So how can we start to view these new beginnings as opportunities? It isn't always simple, but our thoughts play an empowering role in shaping our experience. Focusing on potential downsides can create self-fulfilling prophecy, whereas consciously looking at possibilities opens us to a world of opportunity. As Henry Ford famously said once, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Next time you're at a new beginning, try to cultivate an optimistic mindset. Moving forward, life isn't just about fresh starts. Change is a constant and often comes unexpectedly, which brings us to our second theme, coping with change. In this segment, which is entitled, When Life Throws Curveballs, we dive into the heart of adaptability. When I was at school, we had soccer, and frequently I was a goalkeeper. I really loved goalkeeping. But the amount of times someone would hit a ball in such a way that they were able to curve it, particularly with the British windy weather, that's a curveball. Cricket, and that is a rock hard, the ball. And often the ground in the summer is rock hard as well. So often the person throwing the ball, the bowler, would spin the ball. And as it hit the ground, it would come up at an unpredictable angle, often hitting you in the most uncomfortable of places without going into too much detail. And similarly, I was going to say rugby as well, but that ball doesn't really count as a ball, does it? So it's already a weird enough ball. But in the States, they have baseball. And again, a curveball comes from there. Even if you've got all the padding and the mask and the stuff, it can get pretty painful. So we all know that life is often bringing you these very unpredictable circumstances that could go this way, that way, or they're already coming in at a weird angle. We all know that life doesn't always follow our plans or expectations. Unexpected changes are really part of the journey. The difference between merely surviving and truly thriving lies in our ability to adapt and find opportunities within these changes. So how do we move from feeling kind of knocked down by life to rolling with its punches? So the first step is acceptance. Attempting to control every detail leads to stress and disappointment. So instead, focus on what you can control. I mean, your attitude for a start, your effort, and your responses to the challenges at hand. It's easy to talk about integrating change, but putting it into practice can be challenging. Many of us have clung tightly to plans, and then you just watch them unravel, leaving us feeling frustrated or defeated. It's a natural response. Our brains crave predictability and certainty, but the only true constant in life is change. Anicca, Vata Sankhara. So rather than resisting it, what if we learn to embrace it? What if we saw change not as a threat, but as an invitation for growth and learning? That shift in perspective is empowering. But how do we actually make that mental shift? Especially when change feels sudden or scary. So here's a prompt to help. How can you turn life's curveballs into something positive? This isn't about pretending that everything is perfect. It's about acknowledging the challenge and asking, what can I learn from this?
Oh my God. You can learn. This is amazing.
And how can I use this experience to grow, particularly when they're so painful a lot of the time? So imagine a detour on your journey, not as a delay, but as an opportunity to explore new paths. Maybe that detour leads you to discover something unexpectedly meaningful. There's a saying, sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself. So these twists, these turns, they might be guiding us towards our true path. So if you're feeling stuck or disoriented, perhaps that curveball is nudging you towards a new direction. And speaking of bouncing back, let's move to our next theme, which is resilience. Thriving in mayhem often means learning to pick ourselves up and keep going. The analogy here is a bit like an action movie sequel with a section called
Bouncing Back, the sequel.
Think of it as the hero's journey, that in the first movie, our hero gets knocked down and faces challenges, but learns and grows.
Something is coming. Something big.
In the sequel, they come back even stronger, ready for bigger battles. Each of us stars in our own resilience story.
One man. One decision. Critics are calling it sensational.
Every setback or challenge we face is just the first act of our comeback. But how can we ensure that our own sequel is even better than the original? So here's a thought-provoking prompt to consider. How can you turn a recent setback into Act 1 of your comeback story? And what lessons have you drawn from it? And how will you use those insights to shape the next chapter? So it's not about erasing the past or ignoring difficulties. Resilience means using our experiences as fuel for growth. Every scar we carry has a story, and each story makes us stronger. True resilience isn't about dodging difficulties. It's about building the inner strength to face them, learn from them, and come back even stronger. When we can view our struggles as stepping stones rather than obstacles, we develop a much, much more robust and enduring resilience. But let's address something that often stands in the way of resilience, change, and new beginnings.
Yeah.
Our old adversary and greatest friend. So fear is what? Fear is often that uninvited guest who shows up when we're on the brink of something new and exciting. In this next segment, which I want to call
Don't fear the Reaper of Change.
we're going to explore how fear and resistance arise in the face of transformation. While the title may sound light-hearted, it addresses a serious point. Change can be frightening, but facing it is key to growth. Even positive change can trigger anxiety because the unknown is unsettling, and our minds are wired to resist anything that seems risky. Our inner alarm system, it often sends signals of danger, even when the only threat is a new opportunity or stepping outside our comfort zone. So, how do we handle this fear of change? Should we ignore it or try to overcome it through sheer willpower? Neither approach is very effective. Ignoring fear often intensifies it, and fighting it can be just exhausting or even depressing. In the chill factor approach, we suggest reframing our relationship with fear. Rather than viewing it as an enemy, what if we tried to understand it? When we listen to our fears, we begin to address them more constructively. Fear is a natural part of the human experience, but it doesn't have to dictate our choices. The goal is to choose courage over comfort. Here's an empowering prompt for this section. What fear is holding you back? What fear is holding you back? Take a moment to reflect on the dreams and the goals that you've postponed because of fear. What opportunities have you missed because you were too afraid to take a chance? So let's pause. Let's think about those questions. Most of the answers lie between here and your knees. You'll feel all you need to learn about fear. As we move forward, let's keep exploring how to embrace and integrate change, build resilience, and face our fears with courage and openness. I'm going to change that because, I have a pet hate about the word embrace when it comes to change. It sounds really Victorian. You don't embrace change. You embrace puppies, teddy bears. Integrate. Let's keep exploring how to integrate change. See, it's more high tech, isn't it? It's got a bit more microcircuitry going on about it. Embracing Skegness comes to mind. Building resilience and face our fears with courage and openness. There you go. To take a moment, pause to breathe. Let's have a bit of that blank canvas that we all love and all hate. Now, with those reflections on fear in mind, or not in mind as the case may be, let's dive deeper into practical ways to not only manage the fear, but to harness it as a force for growth. We've talked about integrating new beginnings and adapting to change. And now we're getting into how to create new beginnings. And this brings us to a section called the awkward first step. What's this about? We'll think of a dance class. That first step has sheer terror involved. We all know this feeling. That initial hesitation before diving into something new, taking that first step can feel clumsy and uncertain. Like learning to ride a bike, a skateboard, or roller skates, or snowboarding. I went to the States, nearly broke my knees trying to move my feet for that first step. So there's wobbling, maybe even a few falls, but eventually we find our balance. When I was 18, I was once perilously late for work as a pump attendant. First jobs, we've all been there. I was at the swimming pool when I noticed the clock, and suddenly it was looking like 3 minutes to my afternoon shift start at 2:00 in the afternoon. And I lived across the park from a swimming pool. I raced home from the swimming pool and I was barefoot. And when I got home, there was my clothes in a pile, and in a clothes change mix-up at my parents' house. My mum said she was going to drive me in the car. I jumped in with all my things, still dressing, and I'd thrown these suede boots in to the car. And as we arrived at the garage, I realized they weren't my boots. They were my friend's boots. And he wore boots that were like 4 sizes bigger than mine. So I arrived to work, clomping in through the door just in time. My boss looked at my huge shoes and he looked up at me and scowled away. Which is incidentally, clomping along like that in shoes that are 2 sizes too big feels kind of how your bones feel in your skin when you are starting to learn to dance at the age of 30, like I did. New beginnings often feel like wearing shoes that are several sizes too big. And the question is, how do we overcome that resistance and take the leap? So one approach is to break down big, intimidating goals into smaller, manageable steps. And rather than focusing on the entire journey, we just focus on the next foothold. Each step towards forwardness builds momentum. And before long, that first step doesn't seem so daunting. But what if that first step doesn't go smoothly? Well, sometimes we stumble right out of the gate, and that's okay. Resilience means recognizing that setbacks aren't failures. They're learning opportunities, adjusting our course, learning from missteps, and continuing forward is all part of the journey. Integrating the messiness of progress helps us to grow. So moving on to adaptability. It's not always about taking bold leaps. Sometimes it's about strategically navigating subtle shifts in life, like a game made up of small chess moves. This brings us to change is the new black. So I'm going to use a fashion analogy to illustrate how change resembles ever-evolving trends. Just like fashion, if we cling to outdated ways of thinking or behaving, we end up feeling stuck or out of touch. So how can we develop this adaptability muscle? Here's a useful prompt. How can you try on a new style of thinking to cope with changes? Experiment with perspective to see if a new way of thinking might suit you better. When change feels overwhelming, remember that adaptability, like style, is something that we can cultivate. Sometimes, though, change feels less like a stylish wardrobe update and more like a tidal wave. When those big, unexpected changes hit, we need resilience. This leads us to our next theme.
The Comeback Kid.
The section that taps into our inner strength to bounce back against all odds. Think of those classic underdog stories like Sylvester Stallone in Rocky 2, or Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in Alien, Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happyness, Russell Crowe as Maximus in Gladiator, where no matter how tough things get, the hero finds a way to overcome. So the prompt there, it invites you to reflect on your own comeback story. What challenges have you overcome? What lessons did you learn? And how can you start writing the next chapter today? Recognizing and sharing our resilience stories can be incredibly empowering, actually. Not only for ourselves, but also for others who may be facing similar challenges. It builds a network of support, a community of underdog comeback kids lifting each other up, which helps us on to our next thing.
Fear. The uninvited guest.
So now let's return to that uninvited guest, fear, just like an unexpected visitor arriving at night, knocking on the door. It can catch us off guard, leaving us wondering, what are you doing here? While we've explored ways to reframe fear, there's also the question of preventing it from sabotaging our efforts to adapt and grow. Fear is pretty natural, but it doesn't have to control our lives. So how do we keep fear from, taking over rather than shutting it out? This approach suggests inviting fear in, giving it a cup of tea, having a conversation with it. By understanding our fears, we can address them constructively. Fear becomes a manageable, even a useful guest, instead of an unwelcome intruder. In this way, rather than letting fear crash the party, we turn it into an ally, learning from it without letting it dictate our choices. This shift makes room for courage, helping us face new beginnings, navigate change, and build resilience, while fear takes a back seat, quietly watching as we thrive amidst life's mayhem. Understanding fear's message is crucial. It's not about ignoring fear, and it's not about pretending it doesn't exist. It's about seeing its purpose and deciding how we respond to it. Fear can actually be a helpful guide, alerting us to potential dangers or areas of growth. But we have to remember that fear, it often stems from just our perceptions, not from reality. For example, consider fear of public speaking. The real problem isn't the fear itself, it's the beliefs we attach to it, thinking we're going to mess up. The people will judge us or we'll be humiliated somehow. These are just thoughts and not facts. Let's have the courage to challenge those thoughts, examine the evidence, and reframe our perspective. Imagine viewing public speaking as an opportunity to connect with others, share ideas, and make an impact rather than as a threat. When fear gets and feels overwhelming, mindfulness is an empowering tool. Often our minds are flooded with worst-case scenarios, making it hard to think straight. Mindfulness allows us to step back, observing these thoughts without judgment, and reconnect with the present moment. Recognizing fearful thoughts as simply thoughts, not reality, can help us create space between ourselves and those fears. And also, mindfulness can take many forms, from a deep breath or a few deep breaths to focusing on physical sensations or the sounds around us, your feet on the floor. The key is to find what works and make it a regular practice. In the midst of chaos, these moments of clarity can help us regain our footing. Begin again and again and again and again. Now, the idea of begin again, 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 and again speaks to the reality that integrating new beginnings and coping with change, building resilience, and facing our fears aren't just kind of one-time achievements that you've done it and you're done. They're ongoing processes. It's not about reaching a perfect kind of unshakable state where we never face setbacks or fear again. Instead, it's about recognizing that life itself is a journey filled with ups and downs, moments of triumph, moments of challenge. The key is to keep moving forward, keep learning, and keep growing. And above all, never give up on ourselves. Think of it this way. Each experience, whether positive or negative, can teach us something valuable. And a prompt here would help. So to encourage reflection on persistence, what's something that you've tried to start over and over again? And how can you be kinder to yourself in the process? What's something you've tried over and over again? And how can you be kinder to yourself in the process? It can be anything. Losing weight, learning a language, learning a musical instrument, communicating with a family member. It could be anything. You name it. Anything difficult. How can you be kinder to yourself? Not so harsh, not so judgmental. We're often our harshest critics, after all. We're quick to beat ourselves up over mistakes and to dwell on setbacks. But imagine if we offered ourselves the same compassion we'd give a friend. When we're kind to ourselves, we allow room for growth, for learning, and for trying again as many times as it takes to reach our goals. Now, as we wrap up this part of the exploration of the chill factor, I'd like to leave you with a few key takeaways and a challenge. These themes, integrating new beginnings, coping with change, building resilience, and facing our fears, interweave to create a tapestry of thriving amidst life's mayhem. This section will be called
Survival of the Chillest.
So let's look at one more perspective on integrating new beginnings. Something called survival of the chillest, which means new beginnings. I mean, they often bring excitement, also some stress. How do we stay calm when things feel new and intimidating? This section emphasizes that coping with change doesn't have to be a struggle. It's not about suppressing emotions, but finding that place of balance, that inner calm amidst the storm. Imagine a tree bending in the wind. It doesn't resist the storm's force. It adapts and it moves with it, and it survives. Here's a question to ponder. How can you practice staying calm and flexible in the midst of change? The mindfulness techniques, as we discussed earlier, they are invaluable here. They're creating mental space between ourselves and life's chaos. It allows us to observe our thoughts and feelings without being swept away. Sometimes surviving the chill means knowing when to step back, maybe delegate, or ask for help. Recognizing that we don't have to do it all ourselves and letting go of control. It can be one of the most empowering ways to remain steady. Which takes us to our next title, The Bends and the Breaks. So now let's revisit resilience with the bends and the breaks analogy, where resilience is compared to a tree in a storm. Those trees that bend with the wind are much more likely to survive than those that remain rigid. Resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about being able to adapt and recover, like a willow tree swaying gracefully in the breeze, or a bamboo. So how do we develop this resilience? Well, one approach is to seek out role models who inspire us with their strength. Think of personal qualities of someone you admire about resilience. What is it about their story that resonates with you? Reflecting on their example creates a mental library of resilience role models. People who remind us that even in adversity, it's possible to bounce back, adapt, and grow. Here's a prompt for reflection. Who is your resilience role model? How can their experiences inspire your own journey? I remember when I was at school and I was young, the headmaster told about Douglas Bader, who got his legs shot off in a Spitfire and yet went on to be a very successful person and overcome that. And looking to those who have overcome adversity with strength can give us strength. Those who have overcome adversity with grace can give us grace. It reminds us that we don't have to face these challenges alone. Others have walked this path, and their stories can serve as our guides. Reflecting on these role models is like having a crowd of supporters encouraging us and reminding us that we're not alone. Even in chaos, we can find strength and support in others' experiences. While fear may feel overwhelming, like a lurking shadow, resilience is the courage to face it and grow stronger. And that's the essence of the chill factor. It's facing fear, adapting to change. Integrate new beginnings with courage and resilience. This section, I call this Beyond the Fringe. Now let's talk about facing those times when we feel stuck in a rut. Because change doesn't always feel like an exciting adventure. Sometimes it feels more like really hard work. How do we motivate ourselves to step out of comfort zones, accept and integrate new possibilities? That's where facing the stagnant fridge comes in. It's a metaphor for the situations where we've grown too comfortable, even when they're no longer fulfilling. Imagine opening your fridge to a waft of unpleasant smells. There's wilted lettuce, furry leftovers, and a science experiment growing in the back corner. You know it needs a deep clean, but the task just feels overwhelming. So you just keep shutting the door, hoping the problem will disappear. And this is how fear can keep us stuck, even when we know change is necessary. Instead of closing that door again, take a moment to reflect on any decisions you've been avoiding because of fear. How can you step out of that stagnant fridge and make the change and move forward? We can all relate to that feeling of stagnation, whether in our careers, stagnation in relationships, stagnation in our daily routines. Remember that fear, while sometimes protective, can also trap us in safe but limiting spaces, prisons. And the challenge is to recognize when fear has become a barrier instead of a protective boundary. So an empowering prompt here would be, what decision have you been avoiding because of fear? How can you step out of that stagnant fridge and make it happen? So it's about identifying what's keeping us stuck and taking steps to break free from self-imposed limits. Staying in unfulfilling situations may feel safer, but the rewards of stepping outside our comfort zones often outweigh the risks. When we challenge ourselves to try new things, we open ourselves to unexpected possibilities. Remember that integrating the journey's imperfections is a key to moving forward. Life isn't about avoiding challenges, but about meeting them with courage, curiosity, and resilience. So as you go forward, consider how these ideas can support you in facing whatever may come. And keep in mind that each step, no matter how small, is part of your journey in thriving amidst life's mayhem. We all have those tasks and decisions we keep tucked away because they seem just too difficult, too daunting. They sit in the back of our minds like leftovers in a fridge, unseen but not forgotten. So let's take this as a challenge to face those fears directly. Together we can ask ourselves, what's one decision I've been avoiding because of fear? How can I take even a small step towards tackling it? And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to confront those uncomfortable things we've been avoiding. Because often the fear itself is far worse than the reality. And the rewards of facing it, they're immense. It's not just about reaching a specific goal or making a particular decision. It's about the empowerment that comes from knowing we're capable of stepping outside our comfort zones. It's about creating a life aligned with what we truly want. So, deep divers, we've officially reached the end of our exploration into the chill factor. We've unpacked empowering concepts and practical strategies for integrating change, building resilience, and confronting our fears. If there's one takeaway, it's this. While change and uncertainty are constants, we hold the power to choose how we respond. Our mindset, our attitude, and our willingness to embrace the chill factor determine whether we simply survive or truly thrive. As you go forward, remember these lessons. Embrace new beginnings, even if they're daunting. Strengthen your resilience because you're stronger than you realize. Face those fears head on, knowing that on the other side lies freedom and possibility. Until next time, stay curious, stay chill, and keep diving deep.